By his third summer, Elian had grown into a sturdy, curious boy with a mop of raven-black hair inherited from his mother and the broad shoulders that promised he would one day match his father's powerful build. He was quick to laugh, quicker still to climb any tree or rock that presented itself, and possessed an insatiable appetite for the stories his mother would tell by the hearth each evening. "Tell me again about the dragons, Mama," he would beg, curled against her side as flames cast dancing shadows across the cottage walls. "The ones that live beyond the Mistwall Mountains. Those are just old tales," Gareth would sometimes interject from his seat by the window, where he would often sit whittling small animals from scraps of wood after a long day at the forge. "No one's seen a dragon in hundreds of years, if they ever existed at all." But Merrin would smile and launch into the stories anyway, tales passed down through generations about majestic, intelligent creatures who had once shared the realm with humans before retreating to lands unknown. Elian would listen, enraptured, those star-flecked eyes wide with wonder as he absorbed every word. It was during one such storytelling session, just after his 4th birthday, that the first undeniable sign of Elian's uniqueness manifested. Merrin had been describing a particularly fearsome black dragon, gesturing with her hands to indicate its massive wingspan, when suddenly the shadows cast by the hearth fire gathered and twisted in the center of the room, forming the unmistakable silhouette of a winged serpent that undulated across the floor and up the far wall. Elian clapped his hands in delight, unaware that he was the source of the phenomenon. His parents froze, exchanging alarmed glances as the shadow dragon performed a silent flight around the room before dissipating back into ordinary, formless shadows. "Did you see it, Papa?" Elian exclaimed. "The dragon came to visit us." Gareth swallowed hard, his whittling knife motionless in his suddenly trembling hand. "I saw it, son." After that night, there could be no more denying the truth of what Widow Heatherthorn had implied. Their son possessed abilities that defied natural explanation, what others might call magic. In the kingdom of Aldermere, magic existed in an uneasy space between acceptance and suspicion. The royal court employed court magicians and seers, wealthy merchants paid handsomely for enchanted items, and even in rural villages like Willowvale, people might seek out those with healing gifts when conventional remedies failed. But there was also deep-seated wariness, rooted in historical conflicts where magic had been weaponized and in religious teachings that regarded unchecked magical power as a potential corruption of the natural order. The Thorns, sensible folk with no previous exposure to anything supernatural, found themselves wholly unprepared to raise a child with such gifts. Yet they adapted as best they could, creating new rules and precautions almost daily. "Never outside the house, Elian," his mother instructed him firmly after he had caused wildflowers to bloom in midwinter during a tantrum. "The things you can do are special, but not everyone would understand." "Like my eyes?" the boy had asked with the directness of childhood. "Yes, like your eyes. Some gifts must be kept private until you're old enough to understand how to use them wisely." Elian nodded solemnly, though in truth, he did not fully comprehend why the shadows he could shape or the small objects he could occasionally move without touching them were any different from his father's ability to bend metal or his mother's talent for concocting herbal remedies that could ease pain or reduce fever. To his young mind, everyone had their own special abilities. His were simply less common than most. Despite the complications his nascent powers presented, Elian's early childhood was predominantly happy and secure. Gareth and Merrin were devoted parents who provided a loving home filled with warmth, learning, and laughter. Their cottage, situated at the village outskirts where the cultivated fields gave way to wild meadows and eventually the vast Ebonwood forest, offered Elian ample space to explore while remaining within sight of home. The village children accepted him readily enough, though he was permitted to play with them only while wearing his eye covering, which his mother had begun embroidering with intricate designs to make it seem more like decoration than necessity. He became adept at games of hide-and-seek, with an uncanny knack for finding the most cleverly concealed playmates. If sometimes small objects would inexplicably shift positions when he was concentrating very hard, or if flowers seemed to turn their blooms to follow his movements, the other children either didn't notice or attributed such occurrences to wind or imagination. Elian's 5th year brought significant changes to his peaceful existence. First came the arrival of his sister, Lyra, born on a perfectly ordinary spring morning with perfectly ordinary hazel eyes. While initially disappointed that his sibling didn't share his star eyes, as he had come to think of them, Elian quickly became a doting brother, spending hours entertaining the baby with shadow puppets that moved with slightly more independence than was strictly natural. The second change came in the form of a stranger who arrived in Willowvale during the Midsummer Festival, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair and clothes of a finer cut than was typically seen in their rural community. She carried no obvious weapons, but moved with the confident grace of someone who knew how to handle herself in dangerous situations. Most notably, she wore fingerless gloves of supple black leather that revealed intricate blue markings inked into the skin of her hands and forearms. Elian first noticed her while participating in the children's foot race across the village green. He was in second place, determined to overtake the miller's son, when he felt a strange tingling sensation at the base of his skull. He faltered, nearly tripping, and glanced toward the crowd of adult spectators. The woman was standing slightly apart from the villagers, her gaze fixed intently on him. As their eyes met, hers a penetrating gray, his hidden behind his customary bandana, Elian felt a peculiar resonance, as if something within him were responding to something within her. He lost the race badly, finishing near the back of the pack, but found he didn't much care. Throughout the remainder of the festival, he kept catching glimpses of the stranger, who seemed to be observing him specifically despite having made no approach to speak with him or his parents. That evening, as twilight descended and villagers gathered for the lighting of the midsummer bonfire, the woman finally approached the Thorn family. Elian noticed his father stiffen slightly, one hand moving protectively to rest on his shoulder. "Good evening," the stranger said, her voice carrying a faint accent Elian couldn't place. "I hope I'm not intruding on your family celebration." "Not at all," Marin replied with careful politeness, shifting baby Lyra in her arms. "Are you passing through Willowvale, or visiting someone?" "A bit of both, perhaps." The woman smiled, though her eyes remained serious. "My name is Talia Nightwind. I'm a seeker from the Order of the Vigilant Star." When the cry of a newborn finally pierced the night air, coinciding with the exact moment the last falling star disappeared beyond the horizon, Gareth burst into the bedchamber, without waiting for permission. The midwife, Widow Heatherthorne, scowled at the intrusion but said nothing as she wrapped the squalling infant in a blanket of soft wool dyed the traditional green of new beginnings. "A son," she announced, placing the bundle in Marin's trembling arms. "Strong lungs. Good color." She paused, her weathered face softening slightly. "And something else. Something I haven't seen in all my 60 years of bringing babes into this world." Marin and Gareth exchanged worried glances. "What is it?" Gareth asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is something wrong with him?" The midwife shook her head.
"No, not wrong.
Just different." She stepped back, gesturing toward the tiny infant. "Look at his eyes." The new parents leaned forward, peering at their son's face. The baby had stopped crying and was now gazing up at them with eyes that seemed impossibly aware for a newborn. But it wasn't the alertness that made Marin gasp and Gareth take an involuntary step backward. It was the color. The infant's irises were a swirling, ever-changing kaleidoscope of silver and blue, exactly matching the hue of the falling stars outside. "Those eyes mark him as touched by something beyond our understanding," Widow Heatherthorne said quietly. "The old stories speak of such children. They walk between worlds, they do." "What does that mean?" Marin clutched her baby closer to her chest protectively. "It means," the midwife replied, gathering her supplies with practiced efficiency, "that this child's path will not be an ordinary one. The stars themselves bent their course on the night of his birth. Watch him carefully. Teach him well." She fastened her cloak and moved toward the door, pausing on the threshold. "And perhaps keep those eyes of his hidden when strangers come calling." With that cryptic advice, she was gone, leaving the new parents alone with their extraordinary child and 1,000 unasked questions. Gareth sank onto the edge of the bed beside his wife, reaching out with one callous finger to touch his son's cheek. The baby turned toward the touch, those unusual eyes focusing on his father's face with an intensity that was both unsettling and somehow wondrous. "We'll name him Elian," Marin said softly. "After my grandfather." "Elian Thorne," Gareth nodded. "A good name." He hesitated, then added, "Do you think what she said is true? About him being different?" Marin gazed down at her child, at those remarkable, impossible eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "But whatever comes, he is our son. We will love him and protect him and guide him as best we can." Outside the cottage window, the night sky had returned to normal, stars fixed in their proper places, giving no indication of the extraordinary celestial dance they had performed just hours before. Within the humble dwelling, the Thorne family slept, unaware that the birth they celebrated was already being noted in faraway places by those who had long awaited the arrival of a child with eyes like falling stars. In the early years of his life, Elian Thorne seemed, by most measures, to be an ordinary child, albeit one who wore a thin strip of dyed fabric around his head to cover his unusual eyes whenever visitors or strangers came to Willowvale. His parents had taken widow Heatherthorne's warning to heart, crafting a story about a birth injury that made their son's eyes sensitive to light. Few questioned the explanation, and fewer still caught glimpses of what lay beneath the homespun bandana. Gareth's hand tightened on Elian's shoulder. "I've heard tales of your order. You travel the realm looking for those with magical abilities." "That's correct, though I prefer to say we look for those with gifts that might benefit from proper training." Talia knelt down to Elian's level, her movements fluid and graceful. "And I believe your son has such gifts, doesn't he?" A tense silence fell between the adults. Elian looked up at his father, uncertain what was happening but aware from his parents' reactions that it was significant. "Perhaps this isn't the best place for such a discussion," Marin suggested quietly, glancing around at the other villagers nearby, most of whom were focused on the preparations for the bonfire lighting but a few of whom had begun to take notice of the interaction. Talia nodded. "Of course. My apologies for my directness. It's something of an occupational hazard." She rose to her feet. "Might I call on you tomorrow morning? I have information that could be of value to you and to your son." After a wordless exchange of glances with his wife, Gareth gave a curt nod. "You may come to the forge after the breakfast hour. But I'll tell you now, we're not interested in sending our boy anywhere." "I understand," Talia said, though something in her tone suggested she had heard similar protestations many times before. She smiled down at Elian once more. "It was a pleasure to meet you, young one. I look forward to speaking with you and your parents tomorrow." As she walked away, blending into the gathering crowd, Elian tugged at his father's hand. "Papa, how did she know about my star eyes?" "I had my bandana on the whole time." Gareth looked troubled. "That, son, is precisely what we need to find out." The meeting the following day took place as arranged, in the relative privacy of Gareth's forge at the edge of the village. The building was a sturdy structure of stone and timber, with a large hearth dominating one wall and various tools of the blacksmith's trade hanging in ordered rows. A section had been curtained off to create a small sitting area where customers could discuss commissions away from the heat and noise of the main workspace. It was here that Talia Nightwind sat across from the Thorne family, her posture relaxed but attentive. Elian, seated between his parents with baby Lyra dozing in a basket nearby, studied the visitor openly now that the initial wariness of the previous evening had evolved into curiosity. "The Order of the Vigilant Star has existed for centuries," Talia explained, her hands resting palm up on her knees, the blue markings on her skin seeming to shimmer slightly in the diffuse light. "We seek out those born with magical abilities and offer guidance, training, and community. Without proper instruction, such gifts can become unpredictable, even dangerous, to the individual and to those around them." "Our son isn't dangerous," Marin said firmly. "Not intentionally, no. But untrained magic responds to emotions, to fears and desires. A child who can manipulate shadows or move objects with thought might unintentionally cause harm during a moment of strong feeling." Talia's expression softened. "I don't say this to frighten you, but to help you understand the importance of proper training." Gareth leaned forward. And I suppose this proper training would require taking him away from his home and family? Eventually, yes, though not immediately and not permanently, Talia acknowledged. The primary training takes place at our sanctuary in the Vale of Whispers, north of the capital. But Elian is still young. For now, I would propose regular visits. I could return every few months to provide basic instruction and monitoring. She turned her attention to Elian. Would you like to learn more about your gifts, young one? Elian, who had been following the adult conversation with unusual concentration for a child his age, nodded eagerly. Can you make shadows dance too? He asked. Talia smiled. My particular gifts lie elsewhere, but I know others who can work with shadows as you do. She extended her hand, palm up, and a small flame appeared, hovering just above her skin without burning her. My affinity is with fire. Elian's eyes widened behind his bandana, and he instinctively reached toward the flame before his father caught his wrist. It's quite safe, Talia assured them, closing her hand to extinguish the flame. I've had many years to perfect my control. She returned her attention to Gareth and Marin. This is what proper training provides: mastery, understanding, and safety. Without it, those with significant magical potential often face mounting difficulties as they mature. The discussion continued for nearly an hour, with Talia answering the parents' numerous questions about the order, its practices, and what exactly would be expected of them and their son. She explained that the Vigilant Star maintained records of unusual celestial events and births that coincided with them, which was how she had known to visit Willowvale during the Midsummer Festival, when local records indicated Elian would be 5 years old, the age when magical. Hashtag the Night of Whispers. Hashtag Part 1. Dawn of Magic. The night Elian was born, stars fell from the heavens. Not metaphorically, they literally descended, brilliant points of silver-blue light drifting down through the midnight sky like dandelion seeds caught in a gentle breeze. Witnesses across the kingdom of Aldermere would later claim it as an omen, though whether good or ill depended entirely on whom you asked. The royal astrologers declared it auspicious, the priests of the Silent Temple warned of impending calamity, and common folk simply marveled at the beauty of it, feeling somehow blessed to have witnessed such a rare celestial event. In the modest stone cottage at the edge of Willowvale Village, Marin Thorne paid little attention to the astronomical spectacle occurring outside her window. Her world had narrowed to the rhythm of her own labored breathing, the encouragement of the village midwife, and the overwhelming sensation of bringing a new life into the world. Her husband, Gareth, a blacksmith known throughout the province for his skill with metal and fire, paced anxiously in the adjoining room, alternating between muttering prayers to whatever gods might be listening and taking deep swigs from a flask of elderberry wine.